Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the NetSuite podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Fisher, and on this episode, I'm joined by Lee Thompson, NetSuite's SVP and General Manager of Asia Pacific and Japan. In fact, Thompson breaks down why NetSuite's native localization in the JPAC region is more important now than ever before, and what that means for NetSuite customers and partners. He also dives into some of the unique challenges the JPAC region faces and the tools NetSuite offers to help overcome them. Finally, he reveals NetSuite's goals across the region and what the company has put in place to reach them.
You're listening to the NetSuite podcast, where we discuss what's happening within NetSuite, why we're doing it, and where we're heading in the future. We'll dive into the details about the software and the people at NetSuite who are behind all the moving parts. We'll also feature customer growth stories, discussing the ups and downs of running a company and how one integrated system can help your business continue to scale.
Before we get into this episode with Lee Thompson, I want to thank our sponsors over at Blue Microphones. If you're a storyteller, you probably know Blue Mics for their iconic Yeti microphone, which has helped millions of people all over the world find and amplify their voices. If you're thinking about creating your own podcast or maybe practicing your voiceover skills or something like that, then you need to check out Blue's new Yeti Caster, the complete mic and boom arm system ready to connect to your laptop, bringing the ultimate broadcast studio setup to your home or office. In fact, that's what I'm using right now. Sounds pretty darn good, don't you think? To get your hands on one of these setups, visit bluedesigns.com and use code podcast at checkout for a special price. Hi, Lee. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the NetSuite podcast from Australia. For our listeners tuning in, we are actually recording this episode down under in Sydney. I know you probably don't like when us Americans sing.
Truth, mate.
It's so annoying.
You can't do that.
I know, but I just I had to.
No wuckers.
Before we dive into NetSuite's growth and impact here in Australia and JPAC overall, I want our audience to get to know you a little more as a leader here at NetSuite, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
So first, can you briefly tell us about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, what you studied, essentially like your path leading up to your career?
Sure. So I grew up in a place called Brisbane. So as you said, we're in Sydney. So to orientate yourself, it's the East Coast, about 1,000 kilometres or 600 miles north of here. And so I grew up in acreage, as a matter of fact, so outside of Brisbane, and had plenty of space. Keen advocate of motor vehicles, so I started restoring cars at a very early age.
Wow.
And from an education perspective, went to a local state high school and then Queensland University to study a Bachelor of Business.
I'm actually going to Brisbane to interview our customer Mountain Bikes Direct.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm excited. Anything I should know?
Yes, you call it Brisbane, not
Brisbane.
I find a lot of Americans say Brisbane,
and
Melbourne.
Uh-huh.
Or Melbourne.
Yeah.
It is Brisbane and Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Yeah, you got it.
See, I told you guys, you learn something new on this podcast every day.
Yeah.
Good to know. So what was your career path after university leading up to NetSuite?
Yeah, so I actually joined the public service for my sins, and my career has actually been a reflection of the emergence or the evolution of the industry. So I started working on mainframe computers, so your audience is already working out I'm a dinosaur, but I started working on mainframe computers back in the 80s, and then I saw this evolution to what was then quite groundbreaking, which was the PC.
Okay.
And so I then decided to move to really selling PCs. So that was the first time I'd made the transition into sales, and I was working for a distributor in Queensland, selling software and hardware to resellers who would then on-sell to customers.
Wow. So how many, I guess that's 30 or so years of experience?
Yes, it's 30 plus years of experience. But I will tell you what transitioned from there was I had the opportunity to travel, and so one of the things that gave me a tremendous opportunity. In fact, my wife and I in the early 90s decided to have our honeymoon in the UK, and so we packed up 2 suitcases and moved to the UK and ended up living there for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
I worked for a software company there, and I absolutely loved it. So it was a accident that we happened to fall into selling software in the UK for 5 years.
Got it.
We had 2 children there.
Okay.
And then we decided we wanted to come back to Australia.
Why?
However,
why though? If you
my
loved it so
wife
much.
was very keen to get back to Australia.
Got it. Okay.
But there was a turning point where one of the companies I'd worked for in the UK had asked me if I was prepared to do an assignment in Sweden. So I moved to Stockholm.
Wow.
And I was working for a software company there. In the olden days, it was called Executive Information Systems. Now you would call it, you would probably call it Business Intelligence.
Got it.
So I lived in Sweden for a while. I was offered an opportunity to stay there. And at the last minute, the same company offered me an opportunity back in Australia. So my wife, once that opportunity presented itself, I had no chance of staying in Europe.
Now, you also were at Oracle.
Yes.
10 years ago. Now you're back.
Yep.
Because obviously we were acquired by Oracle. What's that been like?
So I must admit, Oracle, so I'd been there for a very long time. So in the mid-90s, I joined Oracle.
Okay.
I'd left probably around 2006. I joined a little company called Salesforce.
Yeah.
And having come back, so you can imagine it's a 10-year hiatus. And I would say Oracle actually welcomed me with open arms.
That's good.
They were
good.
really receptive. What I found interesting is I went to their first senior leader meeting for Oracle, about 120 people in the room, senior managers. About half of the audience I already knew.
Oh, there
and
you go.
the other half welcomed me with open arms. So
Yeah.
Oracle has been absolutely fantastic
Yeah.
in embracing not just me, but NetSuite.
Yeah.
And they've been very open to trying to understand our culture, try to understand cloud, trying to
Yeah.
understand our go-to-market strategy. So they've been nothing but fantastic.
We're going to actually talk about that a little bit later in this podcast, but you mentioned it, so I got to ask. You worked for Salesforce. What's the biggest differences you can note between NetSuite and Salesforce?
Well, let me start with what's common.
Okay.
So when I joined Salesforce, it was about an $800 million company. And interestingly, when I joined NetSuite, it was about an $800 million company.
So this is mid-2000s or so? When is this?
So I joined Salesforce 2009.
Okay.
And I joined NetSuite 2015.
Okay.
But what I found was in common was they all speak cloud. It's in their DNA. What I found was different, though. Salesforce is a point solution. A very good CRM, but it's a point solution. At NetSuite, it is a fully integrated suite, and that is a very different conversation. And so what was similar was the DNA and the culture of the company. What was different was the fact that this is a business-to-business conversation where organizations are making really critical decisions about standardizing on NetSuite.
Got it. So you came to NetSuite January of 2015 as the SVP and General Manager of Japan and Asia Pacific, also known as JPAC for our listeners. We'll reference it as JPAC throughout the rest of the podcast. A lot has changed over the last 4 years, including the Oracle acquisition. But before we get into that, can you tell us what your role entails?
Yes, so I'm responsible basically for all sales for Asia Pacific and Japan for NetSuite.
Got it. And how has your role changed over the past 4 years as NetSuite continues to expand globally at such a rapid pace?
Yeah, amazing change.
Yeah.
So let me take you back to 2015. We probably had, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 sales reps covering the entire region.
Wow.
So now we have about 300 sales reps.
Oh my gosh.
And it's been transformational. So take you back to 2015. We really made the decision that we needed to focus. And one of the errors that I think we'd made is that Australia was the centre of the universe. And when you're covering such a diverse region, there are many different cultures, many different expectations, and I don't think we did a good enough job of empathizing with each of those cultures. So one of the things that we changed was to move from one central hub covering JPAC to build out, at that stage, we built out 3 hubs. So what that meant was that we had Sydney as the hub for ANZ,
Okay.
we established Singapore as the hub for Asia, and we established Tokyo as the hub for Japan. And we gave them far more authority and autonomy so that they could take global best practices but implement local solutions for the customers that were more appropriate.
How do you maintain the NetSuite culture and our story when you're kind of, catering the business to all of these different cultures with all of these different people and employees.
Extremely difficult, and a lot of this is about the leadership. So we have a couple of initiatives that we put in place, and I talk about the 3 C's, which is clarity, consistency, and communication.
Okay.
So we provide clear direction as to what the strategy is from NetSuite, and frankly, that comes from HQ. But we make sure that we re-articulate that in a meaningful way in the region. We have to behave in a consistent manner. So go back to 2015, candidly, we were probably kind of a gangly teenager. We were a bit scrappy, and our success was dependent or predicated on the capability of the individuals at the time. And we really had to build out a machine or build out an organization that had the ability to grow and scale.
Got it.
And so we put the foundations of that in probably in 2016. And we're still constantly evolving and learning, but we now have 5 hubs.
Okay.
So we've also opened up now in India. So our hub there is Bangalore, and we have another hub in China, and that's headquartered in Shanghai.
And how has the expansion in JPAC grown over the last couple of years, and why is it more important now than ever before?
Yeah. So the way it's grown is, as I said, we've built out these kind of 5 regional hubs now. And what we've taken is the things that are coming out of headquarters are game-changing. They're really transformational initiatives. Tremendous IP and experience, given an organisation with 20 years of experience. We've done this for a long time. So we've taken the best practices of what comes out of North America. We make that available for each of the leaders in each of the hubs with a view to them ideally following the script, but if there's an opportunity to deviate or localize, then they do that. So I'll give you an example of where we deviate from HQ was predominantly around channel. So in Asia Pacific and Japan is a very channel-centric market. So whilst we still have a direct operation, we have a huge investment that we've made in our partners. And the customers look to the partners for 2 things. One is the relationship, because of these remote locations, they tend to have a relationship with the prospect, and secondly, the ability to implement. So we spend a lot of time investing in enabling the partners to be essentially an extension of NetSuite. So as we were talking before about how do you maintain the culture within the 5 hubs, there's an added degree of complexity, which is how do we also maintain the culture within our partner community.
And how has Oracle, the acquisition with Oracle, which happened in 2016, how has that affected this type of growth?
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I did go in with a degree of trepidation because my perception is that Oracle has a certain way that they want to do things, and it's a juggernaut of an organization. And frankly, I had some concerns that they may not understand or embrace cloud. Much to my surprise, they have been extremely accommodating in investment. So the 2 things that I think that they've given NetSuite is brand equity. And in fact, in some of the geographies, NetSuite didn't have a brand. And so for us to then leverage the brand of Oracle has enabled us to fast track our presence in a lot of these new geographies. And the second thing is an investment in funds which we never had access to previously. And that's manifested itself in 2 ways. Firstly, by hiring many more additional people. I'm shocked every time I see NetSuite staff that how we fill a room, whereas before we could have filled a telephone box with resources. And secondly, in the R&D. Our ability now to invest in product across multiple geos, and particularly with Suite success, it's never been a more exciting time than now at NetSuite.
Can you actually speak a bit more into our native localizations across JPAC and what that means for our customers, not just our customers in JPAC, but our global customers as well?
Sure. So think about there are some foundational levels. So you kind of take a product which is developed at HQ, and there's a requirement for us to localize in region. So step 1 is to take that product and to localize in the geography. And in some cases, our partners play a role in the last mile for the implementation for our customer. But assume you have the base level of that product, then we take the Suite success methodology and overlay that on the product. And what that means is the benefit to the customer is significantly shorter implementation cycle and a significantly more cost-effective model, because we've taken the best practices of 20 years of experience and 16,000 companies using NetSuite, and we've basically made that available as IP for prospects and customers moving forward.
We've talked about it multiple times on this podcast, but just For those tuning in, maybe it's their first time. Can you just quickly give us a breakdown of Suite Success?
So for me, Suite Success, when I'm talking to organizations, they typically always have two compelling issues. One is how do I reduce cost, and one is how do I increase revenue. By taking a methodology, a proven methodology like Suite Success, and enabling an organization to implement quickly in a very affordable manner, frees them up to focus on running their business, not developing technology.
Right.
Now, the beauty of that is not just the version of Suite Success that they take, but phase one, get it in, get it quickly done and be operational. Phase two enables you to then augment that in the form of either a additional product or some customizing that might be more appropriate. But the first phase of this means the customer is up, running, live within 45 days.
Yeah. And do we cater this to different industries?
We do cater for different industries. So think about verticals. So particularly here in Australia, we're very strong in wholesale distribution, manufacturing. We're strong in services. We're certainly strong in retail.
Okay.
And then think of kind of a horizontal offering, which is financials first, which is an entry-level horizontal solution which organizations across the board can use and mobilize very quickly.
What are some of the specific challenges in JPAC?
So go back to the cultural things that I talked about before. I think that was a lesson learned, which was not to impose. So the first thing is cultural awareness and sensitivity. I think the second thing is it's such a broad territory. So there's a 5.5 hour time zone difference between New Zealand and India, right? So you're spanning a very big geography.
Yeah.
And so to your question earlier, which is how do you maintain that consistency? Because at the end of the day, when people think NetSuite, whether they're in Mumbai, whether they're in Sydney, whether they're in Shanghai, it's our brand and our reputation that we stand by.
Right.
And so think about global organizations, very large corporations in headquarters or in the US may have operations in JPAC. They expect exactly the same kind of service and customer experience that they get from the US office in the region. So it's our responsibility to make sure the customer is delighted, not just with the experience, but also with innovation.
So other than like the culture that we offer and the consistency, what does NetSuite offer this market that others don't, that competitors don't?
Well, I think we have two unique value propositions. Whenever I talk to C-level executives, and I do find, depending on the geography, at times people are, they're on the cusp about making that jump to cloud computing. And so typically I meet the C-level executive, they understand the product benefits, but there's that moment where they just want to know that the vendor cares and has their interests at heart. And the value of a corporation that's been around for 20 years, its DNA is cloud computing. When I look into the eye of the executive and I go, we'll make sure you're okay. We've got 16,000 other organizations that we've looked after. We have a host of referenceable customers. But at the end of the day, they just want to know that you're serious and committed about their success.
Right.
And that's it. That's not unique in the geography. That's just about people.
And what about when you're talking to somebody like that? They're in Australia. Obviously Oracle NetSuite HQ is out of San Francisco. How do you kind of compel them to believe that we are natively local and that we will address all of their specific needs, even though we're a U.S.-based company that's now, that's now expanded here?
That's a great question, and honestly, it does come down to looking them in the eye, and it's personal.
Yeah.
When an individual's making that decision, these are C-level executives who are betting the future of their career and they're betting their business on NetSuite.
Yeah.
And they want to look me in the eye and they want to know that I am authentic and that I genuinely care about their success. And so here's the beauty of cloud computing, though, or in software as a service. If you haven't delighted the customer with that experience, come the end of the contract, they can walk away.
Right.
So if you don't provide them with an outstanding service, if you don't innovate with new releases that is meaningful to their business, they have the option to walk.
Right.
So this is not just a single transaction. This is an ongoing relationship with the customer.
Right. And I love that our story, like even with Evan Goldberg as the founder of NetSuite, I mean, he built this on the foundation of helping other entrepreneurs, fulfill their goals.
Yeah.
So I love that story too, and how the two, connect. And, it doesn't matter where you are, Shanghai, Sydney, San Francisco, it's the same story and the same goal.
And it's the authenticity of the story.
Exactly.
Which American company started with a guy in a garage, was featured on Shark Tank, and now has over 1 million customers? Hint, they're reducing crime in neighborhoods everywhere. Here's Ring Video Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff with his secret to success.
It's true. In just a few years, we've had huge growth. We've hired hundreds of people, expanded our warehouse, and we're shipping millions of units a year, all while making sure our customers are happy. I've had lots of things to worry about, but I never worry about our finance and accounting because we use NetSuite from Oracle. From the beginning, NetSuite let me see what's going on with my business in real time, from revenues to expenses, customers and orders, even HR. I run my business from a dashboard right on my phone. NetSuite has been my business management system from 10 to a team of over 1,000, and NetSuite will be my choice as we continue to innovate and grow.
Go to netsuite.com/ring to see how Jamie scaled his business. You'll also get our free guide titled Overcoming Your 5 Obstacles to Growth. That's netsuite.com/ring for your free guide and the story of a great American company. netsuite.com/ring.
What goals did you set 4 years ago in Jpac, and how have you reached them, and how have they changed?
Yeah. So 4 years ago, frankly, the organisation was growing at a phenomenal rate. And unfortunately, Asia Pacific and Japan was not. We were the laggard as far as performance was concerned. And I guess the one thing that I did was get the organisation to focus. The challenge for NetSuite is we're overwhelmed with opportunity, right? So you think about our offerings, it's perfect for small, medium and large organizations. We have solutions across multiple industries and we're expanding into multiple geos. It's very easy to get distracted. And so what we did was we focused. Now, that was a material impact from a results perspective within the first 12 to 18 months, but it wasn't without its pain. Because you're telling a lot of people there are things that they cannot do because it's not our priority. And in answer to your question, what's changed? We've now evolved into a very large corporation. And so the balance is, how do we keep our culture and our traditions and customer centricity whilst being a significantly larger organization? And in my opinion, there are two things that we've done. One is we've put a leadership structure in place now, which we did not have a few years ago. And those leaders run their own business. It's a line of business, so think of them as very entrepreneurial. And the success, our future and the success of NetSuite really is predicated on the frontline managers maintaining the culture and interfacing with the customer and authentically caring about the customer. So as long as I have the right leaders in place and as long as I have the right frontline managers, we will be successful.
So your role then has changed significantly.
That it has.
Now you're overseeing, leaders that are, in these 5 different hubs and all over the place. What does that mean for you? I mean, how have you managed that change, and what do you look forward to in the future?
Yeah, so it has been a change. So go back to 4 years ago, I think what we really had was kind of super reps. If you put a deal in front of them, they were very good at prosecuting that deal. To have those people move away from that and lead, that's a challenge. And culturally, that's a big difference for people. So the challenge for me was to get out of the way because the natural tendency is, I know what to do, I'll jump in.
To micromanage a little bit, yeah.
So think about the levels of hierarchy, and I'm not trying to frame this as a bureaucratic organisation, but what I'm trying to do is build an organisation that's empowered, put the customer first, and it's okay to make mistakes, just only make it once.
Learn from them.
But the intention is to build a scalable organisation that has the ability to repeat and put good people to lead and run their business in the way they think is appropriate. And also going back to this being empathetic to each of the cultures within the regions that they cover.
When you're recruiting, how do you recruit for somebody that can look a C-level exec in the eye and make them feel comforted and make them understand that NetSuite is trying to help them to the best of their abilities? Because you can do it. I can see where I'm sitting across from you, looking at you, and I can see how you would bring that empathy and authentic, personality when you're in a meeting with some of these execs. How do you recruit for that, or how do you teach that?
Oh, look, I think it's got to be. I think it's got to be in your DNA, right? So, we've interviewed lots of salespeople who are, there for the transaction, and that's not the nature of our business. That's old school. The salespeople that we want, I consider them more business people who can sell than salespeople.
Got it.
All right. And if you can relate to a business leader and truly empathise with some of the challenges they're facing, what we don't do is go in and try and lead with we've got the answers to your questions before you even ask the question. What we try to do is understand their business and then put forward a solution that's appropriate. And you can tell those people a mile off. And to your question is, can I teach people that? No.
Got it.
It has to be authentic.
It's a recruiting thing. You know,
Yeah,
when
you
you're
identify people who have that authenticity.
So now with all of these changes that have taken place, what are your goals in JPAC today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the next, let's say, 5 years?
Sure. So if you think about the economy, so the NetSuite economy, so in Asia Pacific and Japan, we haven't even scratched the surface. So our market penetration, to be candid, is kind of 0.00, and there is no dominant ERP provider in these geographies. There's a huge amount of market space for us to pursue. And so going back to my theme earlier, which is what I did 4 years ago and what we need to do now, which is to focus and concentrate on providing solutions for organizations and have them referenceable.
Okay.
Because it's not NetSuite that sells, it's our customers that sell NetSuite.
Right. Those references, yeah.
The more people that speak positively about the experience, the more we sell. And this is greenfield. There is so much opportunity, it abounds. And so the question will be, what will we focus on?
Mm-hmm. If there's no dominant ERP in this region, what are you seeing companies that you're working with, what are they using to manage their financials?
Yeah, it depends on the level, and it depends on the geography. So, for example, Xero is very popular here in Australia, which is kind of an entry level. What has happened, though, is those customers are kind of maxed out on capability.
Right.
And so they look for the next solution. The beauty of NetSuite, though, is, and the advice I give people is, think about future-proofing your decision. It's not just the now. It's as your organisation grows and expands, how do you future-proof so you don't have to make those changes? If you go to India, there's an entry-level accounting package called Tally. And so lots of organisations are now moving away from Tally over to NetSuite. If you go to Japan, there's a local independent software vendor called Jpac, which is a Japanese proprietary technology. And so lots of organizations now are making the move from Jpac to NetSuite. And the reason they're doing that is true cloud, integrated suite, global player.
Got it. Good to know. What else can you tell us about NetSuite's expansion across JPAC?
It's never boring. There's a lot going on. It's fast, and it's about prioritizing. But you know what? It's so much fun. And I do have to say that Oracle have been nothing but supportive in giving NetSuite the latitude and the freedom to be entrepreneurial, to grow as a business, and frankly, they're trying to take some of the best practices from NetSuite and replicate that within Oracle.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool to see.
What would you say are some of our best practices?
Suite Success just astounds me.
Yeah.
That is just a rocking solution, honestly. To be able to have a conversation with an organisation and say, I can have you up and running in 45 days, and it's going to cost you a very affordable, less than $100,000, they're going, where do I sign?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so I think Oracle's looking at that. If you think about Oracle, it's high end, it's very rich, deep functionality, but they have to kind of integrate all of that.
Yeah.
And NetSuite's done all the work for the customer. It's already integrated.
It's that idea of bite small, chew fast, right?
Exactly.
It's the idea of allowing somebody to not be intimidated by all that we have to offer. Instead, they're doing it bit by bit.
That's right.
What does JPAC expansion mean for our customers? Not just the customers in these regions, but customers that are in the US and in EMEA and everywhere else. What does it mean for them?
So I have lots of organizations. If I think about typically organizations have started in the US and they've got operations in other geographies. So let's go to Korea, for example. So there are organizations all over the region that have, as I said earlier, the expectation that they have the same experience with us here as they do in North America. But the value proposition I think we add, which is the power of cloud computing and the power of software as a service, which is if we have a large corporation push NetSuite to innovate with complexity or volumes of transactions, once we innovate for that one organization, we innovate for all 16,000 customers.
Right.
So that is the power that any innovation that's done in North America, I've got an organization in Jpac that's the beneficiary of that.
Right. We talked to Two Birds Brewing, Danielle Allen, who's one of the co-founders, who said exactly that. She said it's really comforting to have a system and a company who has dealt with something that we're going through somewhere else. It doesn't matter. They've been through it. They know how to fix it. They know, the software is constantly changing to adapt to those different needs.
Right. And then it comes back to credibility and authenticity, because you know what, I guarantee we've seen it. Somewhere in NetSuite, we've seen it before.
Yeah. With your extensive background in software sales, what's your message to organizations considering a new business system?
Look, I think if you're going to be considering a new business system, you need to look at what the market has to offer. The advice I'd give you, first of all, is true cloud. I do see lots of organizations that represent themselves as true cloud, and frankly, they're not. What they've done is they've built kind of an old funky model, which is a dedicated system, or every instance is bespoke for every customer. That's not cloud computing.
Right.
It has to be true cloud. And a lot of that is based on what's called multi-tenancy. So I won't go into that, but it has to be true cloud, it has to be innovative, and has to be born cloud. So if you look at NetSuite, born cloud 20 years ago. The second thing that I would encourage them to look for is referenceability.
Okay.
How many customers do you have currently using this? Because a lot of startups are talking about true cloud, but they have no customers. So if you want the confidence that you can make a decision and stay with an organization that has a reputation, broad customer base, and experience, then NetSuite obviously needs to be considered.
And obviously NetSuite checks those boxes off, like we talked about this entire podcast. What else can you tell our listeners, prospects, and customers about the future of NetSuite in general?
I think the future of NetSuite is bright. So to give you an example, in fact, since the acquisition here in Australia, we have been signing for every business day we bring a new customer to NetSuite. So every day our doors are open, we sign a new customer. That's empowering because we bring new customers to the fold. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you so much, Lee, for being on this episode of the NetSuite podcast with us. And I look forward to talking to you more in the future and learning as we continue to expand across JPAC.
Great. Thanks, Kendall.
Great advice there for really any company considering a new business system. True cloud, born cloud, innovative, and referenceability. Thank you so much to Lee Thompson for joining us on this episode of the NetSuite podcast. We also want to thank our editors over at Lampstand and all you listeners for tuning in. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Until next time.
You just listened to the NetSuite podcast. Be sure to tune in every week with more NetSuite developments, stories, and insights into the benefits of one integrated system to help you run your business.